The chamber was simple, almost bare, yet the flicker of candles softened its edges. A rough wooden table held a single jug of wine, untouched. Heavy curtains blocked the cold wind from the highlands outside, but nothing could block the tension that sat between them. Jamie stood near the hearth, tall, uncertain, his hands fidgeting though his face remained calm. Claire stood near the bed, her eyes lowered, her thoughts racing. The silence stretched long, heavy, like the thick stone walls around them. It was the kind of silence where every small sound became sharp. The snap of burning wood, the rustle of fabric as she shifted, the quiet sigh Jamie let out when he thought she would not notice. This was not the wedding night either of them had dreamed of. For Claire, the weight of another life still pressed on her heart, memories of a husband she could not forget. For Jamie, the honor of his family and the duty of a husband pressed upon his shoulders, though his heart longed only to show respect. Jamie's eyes met hers for a fleeting moment. He did not rush forward, he did not demand. Instead, he spoke with a voice steady but soft. "You need not be afraid of me, Claire." His words broke the silence, but they did not break the tension. Claire looked at him, searching his face, trying to read if his words were truth or just comfort. The firelight danced across Jamie's features, highlighting not only his youth, but also the scars he carried. They were marks of battles fought and survived, yet there was no pride in them, only quiet strength. His gaze carried no force, only patience. Claire could feel that patience, the kind that waits without anger, the kind that admires without taking. She folded her arms around herself, unsure, caught between fear and curiosity. He did not step closer. He simply stood there, giving her space, giving her time. And yet in the way he looked at her there was something new, a kind of admiration she had not expected. He did not look at her as a man might look at a prize. He looked at her as if she were a mystery he longed to understand. The chamber, so cold and bare, seemed to soften with that look. Claire, still guarded, felt a small shift inside her. She was not ready to trust, not ready to open her heart, but she could not ignore the truth in Jamie's eyes. He admired her, not only for her beauty, but for her strength, for her fire, for the very fact that she stood there unbroken, even with the weight of two worlds on her shoulders. And so the night began, not with passion, not with fire, but with the slow, careful spark of respect. Jamie finally stepped forward, the floorboards creaking under his boots, but his movement carried no rush, no force. He paused halfway between the hearth and the bed, his hands open at his sides as if to show he had nothing to hide. The fire behind him painted a soft glow along his shoulders, giving him the look of both strength and gentleness. "I ken this night is strange to you," Jamie said quietly, his accent thick but his voice warm. "It is strange to me as well. I have never stood in such a moment before." His words carried honesty, and though Claire tried to hold herself steady, she felt her guard bend just slightly. Her heart was still divided, her thoughts still haunted by another man in another time. Yet Jamie's voice pulled her back into this chamber, into this night. She answered softly, almost whispering, "I did not expect any of this." Jamie's lips curved into the faintest smile, not one of amusement but of understanding. "Nor did I," he admitted. "But what is done, and I would rather we begin not as strangers who must share a bed, but as two people who may learn to trust." The silence returned, but now it was different. It no longer pressed like a weight. It floated like a question waiting to be answered. Claire studied him in the dim light. There was no greed in his eyes, no hunger. He stood there, patient, as if willing to let the night pass without touching her if that was what she wanted. That patience was unexpected. It unsettled her more than any bold advance might have. Finally, Jamie lifted a hand, slow and careful, and gestured toward the small jug of wine on the table. "A drink, maybe? To ease the air between us." His tone was calm, almost shy, though his frame carried the look of a warrior. Claire hesitated, then nodded. Jamie poured the wine into two simple cups, the red liquid catching the flicker of firelight. He handed one to her, not stepping too close, waiting until she reached forward. For the first time their hands brushed. The touch was brief, but Claire noticed something in it, a steadiness, a warmth that seemed to ground her in this moment. They both sipped. The taste was sharp, earthy, and the silence stretched again, yet this time it felt easier. Jamie placed his cup back on the table and spoke once more. "Claire, I do not wish to frighten you, nor to claim more than is given. Tonight I ask only this, that you see me as I see you. Not a duty, not a burden, but a soul worth knowing. The word surprised her. She had expected formality or perhaps demand. Instead, his tone was quiet, almost reverent. For a moment, her defenses faltered. She looked at him, not as a stranger in a strange land, but as a man who seemed to carry both courage and gentleness in equal measure. And so, the chamber shifted again. The fire burned the same. The shadows moved the same, but the space between them was no longer filled with fear. It was filled with the fragile beginning of something new. Something neither of them had asked for, but both of them might need. The firelight danced across the chamber, and for a while, neither spoke. The wine had loosened the edge of silence, but something deeper still waited to be said. Jamie stood tall, yet his posture was careful, almost as if he feared breaking the fragile air between them. Claire's eyes drifted from the flicker of the flames to his face, searching for a hint of what lay beneath his quiet patience. Jamie shifted slightly, his gaze steady upon her. "You may think me bold for saying this," he began, his voice low, "but I cannot stand in this room with you and not speak what is in my heart." His words caught Claire by surprise. She lifted her head, uncertain if she wanted to hear them, but Jamie continued, his honesty carrying him forward. "You are beautiful, he said, his accent softening the word. "But it is not beauty that strikes me most. It is the fire in your eyes, the way you hold yourself, even when the world tries to pull you down. That is what I see when I look at you. That is what I cannot help but admire." Claire felt her breath catch. She had expected compliments, perhaps flattery, but not this. Not words that looked past the surface, straight into the part of her that she tried so hard to keep hidden. Her hands tightened around the cup, the warmth of the wine grounding her. She met his gaze, and for the first time that night she did not look away. Jamie stepped a little closer, his movement still slow, still giving her space. He did not reach for her, not yet. Instead, he let his words build the bridge. "I see a woman who has walked through pain and still stands. I see strength in you, Claire, stronger than most men I've ever known. And I would be honored, truly honored, if you would let me know you, not only as my wife, but as the person you are." The room grew smaller then, the distance between them less than it had been all night. Claire's heart raced, not from fear, but from something unfamiliar, something she had not expected to feel on this night. Respect, admiration, a strange, quiet comfort in his presence. Jamie's eyes softened as he watched her, as though every flicker of her expression mattered to him. He was not a man trying to conquer a moment. He was a man trying to understand it, to honor it, and that made his admiration more dangerous than desire. It was honest, it was unshaken, it was real. Claire set her cup aside, her hands suddenly restless. She wanted to speak, to push him away with words, yet what came out was softer than she intended. "You see too much," she whispered. Jamie's smile was faint, but his reply came with quiet certainty. "I see enough." And in that moment, the night shifted again. It was no longer about duty, no longer about fear. It was about two souls, one broken by time, the other shaped by honor, beginning to see each other, not as strangers, but as something more. The chamber was hushed. The only sound the quiet pop of firewood as sparks drifted upward. For a long moment, Jamie and Claire simply looked at one another, the air heavy with words unspoken. Jamie's admiration had been laid bare, but now came the harder part, proving that those words were more than just talk. Slowly, Jamie moved closer, his steps measured, deliberate. He did not tower over her, did not reach with urgency. Instead, he paused just within arm's length, giving her every chance to step back. When she did not, his hand rose, unhurried, and he extended it toward her. Not to claim, not to grasp, but to offer. Claire's eyes flicked to his hand. The firelight caught on his skin, roughened by years of labor, scarred by battles survived. It was the hand of a fighter, yet in this moment it trembled with restraint, with gentleness. She hesitated, her breath uneven, her heart torn between fear of losing herself and the unexpected safety she felt in him. At last, she placed her hand in his. The touch was small, simple, but it carried a weight neither of them could ignore. His palm was warm, steady, grounding her as if she had been drifting until now. He did not pull her closer. Instead, he simply held her, letting the silence speak louder than words. "You've been through storms," Jamie said softly, his thumb brushing lightly across her knuckles. "I can see it in the way you hold yourself. But know this, tonight is not a storm. Not with me. His voice was low, almost reverent, as though he feared breaking the fragile trust she had given him. Claire's throat tightened. For so long she had stood guarded, her heart locked behind memories of another life. Yet here was a man who did not push at the lock but waited patiently for her to open it. She searched his face, expecting hunger or demand, but found only sincerity. The firelight flickered across them both, and for the first time, the chamber no longer felt cold. Jamie lifted her hand slowly, pressing the back of it to his lips. The kiss was not one of passion but of honor, a promise that he would not take more than was freely given. Claire's chest rose with a shaky breath. It was not love, not yet, but something had shifted deep within her. She had been seen, truly seen, and instead of judgment, she found respect. Jamie's patience, his quiet strength wrapped around her like the warm glow of the fire. The night that had begun as a duty now felt like a choice. Her choice. The warmth of Jamie's lips still lingered on Claire's hand, and for a long moment she could not move, could not speak. His gesture had been simple, yet it carried more weight than any vow spoken in front of witnesses. It was a promise in silence, that he would treat her not as property, not as a prize, but as a woman whose trust mattered. Claire drew a slow breath, her hand still resting in his. She felt the pressure in her chest ease, though the ache of memory refused to vanish. She looked into the fire, her voice low when she finally spoke. "You don't know me, Jamie, not truly. There are things about me you could never understand." Jamie's brow softened, his hand tightening slightly over hers, not to restrain but to reassure. "Then tell me," he said gently, "and if I do not understand, I will still listen." For a moment Claire nearly laughed. How could she explain the truth that she came from another time, another world of machines and cities he could not even imagine? To tell him would be madness. Yet the sincerity in his voice pressed against the walls of her silence. She did not tell him everything, but she gave him a piece of herself, a fragment of her sorrow. "I was married before," she whispered, her voice breaking. "To a man I loved deeply. He is gone now, but he is not gone from me. His memory stays, and I don't know how to let it go." Jamie did not flinch, did not show jealousy or anger. He lowered his head slightly, as if honoring the ghost she carried. He said softly. "Then your heart is still shared. I cannot take that from you, nor would I wish to. A man who was loved so well deserves to be remembered." Claire's eyes stung with tears she had not expected. No one had ever spoken of her grief with such acceptance, such quiet understanding. She blinked them away quickly, but Jamie saw, and instead of turning from her, he stepped closer. "Do you see these?" he asked, and he turned his arm so the fire revealed a line of scars across his skin. "Each one is a story, each one a mark of pain, but they do not shame me. They remind me that I survived. Perhaps your heart carries its own scars, and perhaps, together, they need not feel so heavy." The words reached her in a way nothing else had that night. He had given her not pity, but kinship. His scars, her grief, they were different shapes of the same truth. Both had been broken, yet both still stood. Claire's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Instead, she let the silence answer for her. Jamie did not press, did not demand. He only held her gaze with that same steady patience, as if to say, "When you are ready, I will still be here." And for the first time since she had been thrust into this new life, Claire felt the faint spark of something she thought she had lost forever: hope. The fire had burned lower, its glow now softer, painting the chamber in deep gold and shadow. The silence between them was no longer sharp or heavy. It had changed, become warmer, more alive, carrying the quiet rhythm of hearts that had begun to beat in step. Jamie still held Claire's hand, and though the gesture was small, it felt like an anchor between two worlds. He lifted his eyes to hers again, his voice low, steady. "Claire, I will never ask you to forget what came before. I ask only this, that tonight, you see me as I am and I see you as you are. No more, no less." His words lingered in the air, and for the first time Claire felt her breath come easier. The wall she had built so carefully around herself began to crack, not from force but from gentleness. Slowly, she stepped closer. Her gown brushed softly against the floor as she moved, and in that moment the distance between them, physical and unseen, grew smaller than it had been all night. Jamie's eyes softened as she came near. He did not reach to claim her. Instead, he let her decide how close she wished to stand. When she stopped just before him, he lifted his other hand, hesitant at first, then bold enough to brush a strand of hair from her face. His touch was feather-light, reverent, as though she were something fragile, yet sacred. Claire's lips parted, slightly a rush of heat rising in her chest. Not fear this time, but something gentler, something that startled her with its strength. She had been touched before, but never with such care, never with such quiet admiration. Jamie's hand lingered near her cheek, waiting, watching her eyes for permission. She did not pull away. The crackle of the fire filled the silence. Her pulse quickened, and she realized she was leaning toward him, not forced, not guided, but by her own choice. Jamie caught the motion, his breath catching as well, though he held himself steady. "You need not fear me, Claire," he whispered, the words trembling with honesty. "I would sooner die than cause you pain." Her throat tightened at the raw truth of his vow. She had known men who spoke of love, men who boasted of devotion. But Jamie spoke as if the words were carved into his bones, unshakable, beyond pretense. And something inside her, long locked away, stirred to answer. Her hand rose, almost without thought, resting against his chest. Beneath the linen of his shirt, his heart beat strong, steady, as if echoing the steadiness he had given her all night. She left her hand there, feeling the warmth, feeling the truth of him. Jamie closed his eyes briefly, drawing a deep breath, as though her simple touch had undone him more than any wound ever could. When he opened them again, his gaze was not that of a stranger, not even just of a husband. It was a man seeing her as something both fragile and unbreakable. And in that gaze, Claire felt the impossible: trust. The night had shifted once again, no longer cold, no longer uncertain. It was not yet passion, not yet love, but the fragile bloom of closeness, born from respect, nurtured by patience, and held steady by the warmth of two hearts beginning to meet in the same fire-lit glow. The chamber seemed smaller now, not because of its stone walls, but because the space between them had vanished. Claire's hand still rested against Jamie's chest, steady against the rhythm of his heart. His hand still cradled hers gently, as though holding something precious he dared not break. Neither spoke for a moment, and yet so much had already been said without words. Jamie drew a careful breath, his voice low when he finally spoke. "I willna pretend to know your whole heart tonight. I willna ask for more than you're ready to give. But I promise you this, Claire. I will guard what trust you've shown me, and I will wait for the rest, however long it takes." His words wrapped around her like the fire's glow, steady and unshakable. Claire felt the ache of her past stir again, but this time it did not feel like chains. It felt like something she could carry, no longer alone. She looked up at him, her eyes softening in the dim light. "You make promises too easily, Jamie," she whispered, though her voice trembled with something warmer than doubt. He smiled faintly, a smile that carried no jest, only certainty. "It isna easy," he said gently. "It is simply true." Claire felt herself exhale as if she had been holding her breath since the moment they entered this room. And in that breath, she allowed herself something she had not allowed all night: peace. She leaned into him, resting her forehead lightly against his chest. Jamie froze for a heartbeat, then slowly wrapped his arms around her, not in possession, not in urgency, but in quiet embrace. The world outside could rage with storms, the past could echo with loss, but in that small chamber, time seemed to pause. Two people, strangers bound by fate, had taken their first step toward something neither had asked for, yet both desperately needed. Jamie closed his eyes, holding her as though she were the most sacred vow he had ever made. Claire's eyes slipped, shut as well, her body sinking into the safety of his arms. No passion burned yet, no hurried desire, but the tenderness between them was stronger than either expected. The fire crackled lower, the shadows deepened, and the night carried them forward, not as strangers, not as prisoners of duty, but as two souls beginning to find each other in the darkness. And so their wedding night did not end in conquest, but in closeness, not in fear, but in trust, not in finality, but in the fragile promise of a love that would grow, tested by storms, and remembered for centuries. As the candles dimmed and the world outside faded into silence, one truth lingered between them, unspoken yet unshakable. Admiration had become trust, and trust would one day become something greater, a love strong enough to defy time itself.